Hello, and welcome to Dining with Death. This episode is on my playlist, Dining with the Departed, where we talk about famous or infamous people who have passed. We discuss their lives and their careers, what they're famous for, and then I show you and taste either their last meal or their favorite food. I'm Stacy Lee. Let's begin. There are certain people who just bring joy to everyone around them. They're born with an internal light that seems to shine from the inside out. They draw people to them. They're magnetic, and they're kind, and they're enthusiastic about what they love. Mr. Rogers comes to mind. Bob Ross does as well. And then there is Steve Irwin. His passion for animals was contagious, and his desire to teach the world about conservation was not only important, it was infectious. He awakened a generation to the crucial steps that must be taken in order to preserve the habitats and the ecosystems for different species, and he birthed a love of wildlife and nature in millions of young hearts across the continents. Stephen Robert Irwin was born on February 22, 1962 in Essendon, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Steve's parents were Lynette Hackinson, who has passed on, and Bob Irwin, who is currently 84 years old. Steve has two sisters, Joy and Mandy, and the family moved to Queensland in 1970. Steve's father, Bob, is an expert in herpetology, and his mother was a wildlife rehabilitator. So Steve Irwin was all set up to become the wildlife expert he became. In Queensland, Bob and Lynn Irwin founded a small reptile park called Queensland Reptile and Fauna Park, and this is where Steve grew up. His daily activities included spending a lot of time with crocodiles and other reptiles. His chores were much different than that of most kids. They included feeding the animals, cleaning out crocodile and snake enclosures, and maintaining the park. When he was only 6 years old, Steve's father gifted him with a 12-foot scrub python, and by age 8, Steve was working with the crocodiles, not just feeding them. His father actually supervised his first crocodile wrestling experience at age 9. Throughout the years at the park, Steve would capture over 100 crocodiles that were in need of relocation. Those that needed medical treatment were kept at Queensland facility. When Steve was in his early 20s, he took over the management of the park, and in 1998, he changed its name to Australia Zoo. Steve Irwin seems like one of those people who was just destined to become what he did. His parents were into it, and he followed right in their footsteps. You know, that doesn't always happen, but he seemed to genuinely love what he did. In 1991, this young woman, Terri Raine, was on tour in Australia from America, Eugene, Oregon to be precise. She too was very interested in wildlife rehabilitation, and while she was touring Australia, she visited the Australia Zoo. On the day she visited, she had a chance meeting with Steve Irwin. Steve would later say, "It was love at first sight." They described their meeting as something that was meant to be, and after only 4 months of dating, they were engaged. On June 4th, 1992, Steve and Terri were married in Terri's home state of Oregon, and then they packed up and left for Australia, where they would make their home. Steve and Terri lived a very dedicated life. They didn't drink, they didn't have couple friends, they didn't go anywhere without each other. They lived together and they worked together, and just about all of their time was dedicated to the zoo and to their work. The couple even spent their honeymoon trapping crocodiles together. Their honeymoon that they did not go on alone, by the way. John Staten and others were with them, and as John filmed Steve and Terri trapping crocodiles together, they knew, but the world didn't, that a TV star was about to be born. The footage taken on that trip would become the first ever episode of The Crocodile Hunter. Do you remember the first time you were exposed to Steve Irwin or saw The Crocodile Hunter? I do. My husband Jason is really into nature shows and history shows and things like that. And we had just started dating, I think maybe a few years into it, and The Crocodile Hunter came out, and we watched it pretty religiously with our kids. For several years, crews followed Steve and Terri Irwin and documented their lives as wildlife researchers and handlers. And in 1996, The Crocodile Hunter debuted on Australian TV. It was an instant success, and the following year, it was picked up on American television. Steve Irwin was now an international star. Almost overnight, Steve and Terri Irwin went from being zoo managers to being famous worldwide, and as they did with everything, they stepped into their role and dedicated their lives to it. This was really the era of Animal Planet. Does Animal Planet still exist? I'm not 100% sure, but we would watch this, and we would watch, what's that show with the kind of handsome older, is he New Zealand, Australia? Jeremy Wade, and I believe the show was called River Monsters, and he was like a fisherman for large fish, large game. I don't know, what are the words? But we would watch that. We would watch Crocodile Hunter, pretty much anything that was on Animal Planet. We were really into that stuff. As Steve Irwin's fame grew, the accolades poured in. Sir David Attenborough said of Steve, "He taught the world how wonderful and exciting it is. He was a born communicator." Steve established large private wildlife refuge in Australia and founded the international organization Wildlife Warriors Worldwide. He is responsible for educating his viewers on the importance of conservation, and he is also responsible for lighting the spark in many people's hearts to learn more about wildlife, to care more about wildlife, and to care more about the world we live in. In July of 1998, Steve and Terri became parents. Bindi Sue Irwin was born to the couple and quickly became part of their TV show and their work. When Bindi was only 9, she got her own TV show called Bindi the Jungle Girl. It was a children's wildlife documentary series. Later on, Bindi won season 21 of Dancing with the Stars. In December of 2003, the couple's son was born, Robert Clarence Irwin, named after Steve's dad. Steve was a great father, but he did spark some controversy when Robert was a baby. Steve was holding his newborn son while feeding a chicken to a crocodile. It was not a great move. Steve was very comfortable with the crocodiles, but they're still unpredictable creatures, and people had justification for feeling concerned. Steve apologized, and it never happened again. The TV show The Crocodile Hunter ended in 2004 with a 3-hour special on Animal Planet. The show had run its course, and Steve wanted to move on to other things. After The Crocodile Hunter ended, Animal Planet gave Steve his own shows, several of them, in fact. One was called Croc Files, one was called The Crocodile Hunter Diaries, and the third was called New Breed Vets. Animal Planet also created Croc Week, a marathon of Steve Irwin and crocodile shows that runs for a solid week. Steve Irwin also became really well known for his appearances on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno and Late Night with Conan O'Brien. On every appearance, Steve would bring a variety of animals with him. He always appeared dressed in the same thing, his signature khaki safari shorts and shirt, and the audience would gasp and ooh and ah as Steve brought exotic animal, one after the other, onto stage. The hosts were sometimes curious, sometimes afraid, and hijinks would ensue. Everyone loved it when Steve came on the show with his animals. Everyone just loved Steve. By 2006, Steve Irwin was on top of the world. He had 2 beautiful kids, he was married to his best friend, and the family was in the process of setting in place a 10-year plan for Australia Zoo. Terri and the kids packed to go on a hiking trip in the outback, and Steve headed off to Queensland, Bat Reef, to film another adventure. In 2001, Steve hosted a show called The 10 Deadliest Snakes in the World, and now he had been asked to create a show called Ocean's Deadliest. The plan was for him to go and film scenes in the ocean with an underwater camera crew. Steve wanted to bring attention to climate change and how it's affecting the oceans and the creatures who live in them. Steve once said on The Larry King Show, "I believe that the time has come where if we don't get animals into people's hearts, they're going to go extinct. We're running out of time now." And he said that 20 years ago. My friends, we are just simply not doing very well with taking care of the earth and taking climate change seriously. It's very, very frustrating, and it's very, very scary. On September 4th, 2006, at the age of 44, Steve set off with the camera crew with no way to know this would be not only his last shoot, but his last day on earth. Steve and his best friend, cameraman Justin Lyons, with whom he'd worked for 15 years, were killing time during a rain delay. The shoot had been going on for about 8 days, and they were really hoping to find a tiger shark for the show. As they sat on the boat, waiting for the rain to let up, Steve got antsy, which was typical for him. He was full of energy and he couldn't stand sitting around. He said to his friend Justin, "Let's go do something." The two men jumped off the inflatable boat and began to swim around looking for something to film. Within minutes, they found a gigantic 8-foot wide stingray that they wanted to film for yet another project Steve was working on. The water was only about chest deep. Justin prepared the camera and set up the shot, and Steve began to talk to the camera and show the beautiful animals off to his audience. Justin Lyons later said, "Stingrays are normally very calm. If they don't want you around them, they'll swim away. They're very fast swimmers. But things were going well, and we figured we'd do one last shot." Justin was on one side of the stingray and Steve was on the other. It sat between them. For the final shot, Steve was to swim toward the camera and Justin would film the stingray swimming away. But that is not what happened. Justin later said, "All of a sudden the stingray propped on its front and started stabbing wildly with its tail, hundreds of strikes in a few seconds. It was moving with such speed. It probably thought Steve's shadow was a tiger shark, so it started to attack him." But the duo had a rule. Even if Steve was injured, Justin was to keep filming, so that's what he did. Justin said, "It wasn't until I turned back and realized the tail strikes had gone through Steve's heart like butter. He was standing in a huge pool of blood, and I knew something was very wrong." The first concern was to get Steve out of the water, as the blood would attract sharks. Initially, they thought Steve's lung was punctured. There was a 2-inch gash above Steve's heart, and he was losing a lot of blood very quickly. They managed to get back to the inflatable boat. Steve was on his back, and Justin said, "Think about your kids." Justin then said, "Steve just sort of calmly looked up at me and said, 'I'm dying,' and then he was gone." Justin did CPR on Steve for over an hour as the boat raced back for help, but there was no saving him. Steve Irwin's heart had been dissected. Even if they had been next door to a hospital, he most likely could not have been saved. Paramedics met the boat at the dock, but did not work on Steve at all. He had been dead for over an hour. Word spread throughout the world that this wonderful person and conservationist was gone. There were tributes and TV specials, and I remember it as a very sad event. Yes, he died doing what he loved, but he was so young and had so much left to give to the world, to his kids, to his family. It was simply a tragic set of circumstances that led to the world losing one of the best. Terri, Bindi, and Robert have gone on to continue Steve Irwin's work. Bindi had 3 seasons of Bindi the Jungle Girl, where she continued to spread the idea of conservation to kids. Robert hosts Robert's Real Life Adventures on Discovery Kids, and he now takes his father's place on the late night talk shows, stepping in to show exotic animals to the nation and to the world. Terri has not remarried. She lost her best friend and partner on that day. She continues work in conservation and has also authored several books. She probably feels Steve Irwin's loss the most. He was an amazing human, a wonderful teacher, and his legacy is one everyone associated with him can be proud of. What I like most about this playlist is getting to know some of the people in the public eye a little better, but also getting to know what makes them just like us. Everybody has a favorite food. Stay with me now because I'm going to show you Steve Irwin's. Steve Irwin's favorite food was Chinese food. I've got a beautiful plate of food here from our local Chinese place, the one we've been eating at for years. It's called Panda Garden. This is Mongolian beef, which is a stir fry of really thinly sliced and marinated beef with lots and lots of onions, green onions and white onions over rice. And then this is egg foo young. This is one that people either really love or really hate. This is my husband's favorite. It's a patty made with shredded cabbage, bean sprouts, and lots of egg. They fry the patty and then cover it in this really flavorful beef gravy that has peas and carrots. So let's give it a taste. That's really good. Really flavorful, lots of good seasoning, and a depth of flavor that I really enjoy. This is one of my favorite Chinese dishes. The beef is really soft. It's been velveted. If you don't know what velveting is, maybe we should do an episode on that. And then the onions are sauteed, and the whole thing is in this sauce that's quite sweet and very beef flavored. I think there's a little bit of star anise in there, maybe Chinese 5-spice. It's so good. Let's try the egg foo young. Egg foo young is like a real hit and miss thing. You don't want to order at a place that doesn't have really good food because it can be a little soggy. But like I say, it's a patty of eggs mixed with vegetables. This is chicken egg foo young. So you also get pieces of chicken on top, and I think you can do beef or shrimp as well. Chicken's really good. And then it's got little vegetables on top, just frozen peas and carrots. Very Americanized Chinese food, I'm sure, but very delicious. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, Dining with the Departed. Hit the like button if you liked the video, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me, and you can always join my Patreon. We have a really big goal on Patreon. If you join Patreon, you can donate just a couple dollars a month if that's what you can give. It keeps the channel alive, but in the end, we want to raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that cannot be tested because there's no money. There are thousands and thousands of sexual assault kits in refrigeration that cannot be tested. There's just no funding. We have plenty of money for other things, but apparently solving those kinds of crimes is not a top priority. So we want to raise money and donate money to those departments that want to have those kits tested. That does two things. It potentially solves the case that the DNA is associated with, but it also gets that perpetrator's DNA in the system in case that perpetrator has committed other crimes. Then when they search that perpetrator's DNA, they'll get a hit and we could make an arrest. So I know it's a big goal, it's a lofty goal, but I'm not giving up. I sure appreciate you spending a little bit of your day with me. I appreciate it more than you know. A lot of you have been here for a really long time now, and it's taking a minute to get where we want to be, but that's okay. Without you, I would not still be doing this, so thank you. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.